Guys, I'm back up at the country property up north. It's about 40 miles between my rental property and here. Just getting off work with my dad. Figured I'd take a peruse around the place, and since I have the time, talk a little bit about it before I head out the door here. We just got off work. Of course, you guys know the motor brigade here. As I was saying before, I feel kind of guilty not filming some of our work around this place, especially this right here. As you can clearly tell, there was an influence. I've said it many times before. We'll talk a little bit about this place. But first, I just want to talk about just how much work we did around this place, just in the yard alone. When we first came out here, first couple of weeks of working around the property and exploring, you couldn't even stand where I'm standing right now. It was that overgrown. That little strip of ferns and stuff, that's about half as thick as what the entire area here was. It was just one little deer trail back that way that we could use to cross the creek to get over to the lot here. There was a whole mess of sticker bushes here. Someone had laid a plank across this, and I didn't find out about that until about a month after we moved in. My friend Brandon and I came out here and chopped away at this place, and for a little while we had a secluded bowl. And when I say that, I mean it's a bowl, but there was a wall of blackberries all throughout this, so it was all secluded. We had our own little private camp spot. Brandon and I spent weeks clearing this place out, eroding the blackberries further and further. Eventually I discovered a pylon here in the ground. It was pretty obvious that someone had built a bridge here. And when one of our alders collapsed, my dad and I took some of the wood from the house we tore down where the new one is standing, and we took some of the car sheeting and utilized the fallen tree and the car sheeting and made a small little bridge, which is kind of a useless bridge, but I will say that my go-kart and my quad get use of it. They're about the only things I own that can get up this grade. This is affectionately what I call the shit shack here. I happened to find an old clip of the first year that we were here. When you compare it to now, you can see just how much we worked on this place. It was pretty dang overgrown. But more about that cabin. So where the cabin's standing now is where I had originally piled all the wood that I reclaimed from the two projects. The house we tore down here and my cousin's property in Ording that we were remodeling. And for the longest time that was just going to serve as a depot. It wasn't supposed to be where the cabin was going to be built. Originally I had a crazy idea to build it up here. And you can kind of see why I wanted to. Now at the time, it was pretty hard to get back here, and it still is. If it's rainy and wet, you certainly can't get a truck up here unless you have four-wheel drive. But you can see I had my intentions. I had gotten started digging some of the infrastructure. There was a beam structure that stood here for almost a year. I actually hustled all that wood out here and chainsawed it, and real old-fashioned. I was going to build some kind of cabin right here. And at the time, it was more secluded. You couldn't really see because of how thick all the brush was here. You couldn't even see up there. These pine trees were like a wall. It almost looked like that was our property line. It's not. I'll have to run my camera back there a little bit too, but let's get over to the cabin first. Certainly the prouder side of the building. And yes, the influence from the old house in town. And as I was saying in the other video, this right here, this is actually from the old house in town, this sandstone block right here. And this sucker is heavy, I'll tell you. This actually sat in our parking lot, or next to the parking lot, next to our house for the better part of 2 decades after my dad had pulled it and many others actually, out of the front of the house. In town, the front wall that the foundation had been built on, sandstone, was beginning to fail and the house was slumping off the hill. So my dad jacked the whole house up and poured stem walls. And a lot of these stones didn't make it back into the foundation, so they were used for other projects and building on the hillside, flower boxes and such, and walkways. But this one had sat in the parking lot for 2 decades. I remember stepping over it hundreds of times as I would take the Escort out for joyrides with my buddy Norman. And eventually, when we bought this property out here, I knew it was ours, so just before the house had sold, I went ahead and made sure that it made its way out here, just in case we decided to build something like this. It's a bit messy in here. I wasn't really planning on taking this video, but we just got off work and figured I could take some of this footage. So all of this is reclaimed. There's some true 2x4. This is something we got from a friend. We've had many fires on this already, and actually had friends stay over for New Year's several times. There's no failing in the mortar there or anything, so it's handled the heat quite well. The whole chimney has. It's not too much to look at down here. It's fairly rough. But upstairs, and this camera's not the greatest for this since it's not a wide-angle lens, but upstairs is our sheetrock and insulated space. And all these windows have window weights in them. I'm a stickler for the historical factor, so I like things to be as accurate as I can make them. That chandelier comes from my aunt's house in Bonnie Lake. She gave it to us when we were doing a remodel. It's not actually old, but it looks nice. So I guess when we sell this property, you know, obviously that's going to go too. The radiator's not hooked up to anything. It's an antique I bought. Holds water. No cracks in it. Not sure what I'm going to do with that heavy beast. It weighs about 200 pounds. But I leave it here for now, just for show. Yep. And this was a sun porch idea that I had. I insisted on it. It could almost be its own room if it had been framed in that way. I wanted this building to have something like that, and I think it's a nice touch. It's still a little bit rustic up here, I admit, but nice space. Bugs certainly like it. Nasty bastards, aren't they? We get a couple of them in there. These windows, of course, are not bug-proof. Couple little cool things while reclaiming this wood from the old house that was here. Now, I used to have 2 pieces of wood that had writing on them, but I think one of them got used up in the wall somewhere. I think my dad accidentally grabbed it, and, well, it's somewhere in here now. This is from the Carlisle Lumber Company, and the other piece of wood I had the rest of the writing on it. So it would say Carlisle Lumber, Onalaska, Washington. Onalaska is a little town not too far from here that had a lumber mill. Many of the towns around here in this county did, almost every one of them actually. And the Carlisle Lumber Company, I'm not sure how many times it's changed hands and names and facilities within Onalaska. There was a smaller lumber mill just as you came into town, but I would believe that this one came from the former mill where the smokestack still stands. There's a log float pond and a really tall smokestack that's still standing, though the rest of the mill is, of course, demolished. Anyway, I held on to this. I can't find the other piece. It's kind of sucks because that's the part that says Onalaska on it. Another cool little find of mine. I think I mentioned it. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. These were some of the nails. Old-fashioned nails. Square head, triangular, square cut, blacksmith nails, or blacksmith cut nails. They have many different names. I'm probably not saying quite the right thing, but these were the nails that were holding my cousin's siding to her house. And I can't count how many times during remodels of old 100-year-old homes, 120-year-old Victorians, that my dad has thrown this stuff out. On the house in town, he, you know, it's just junk to him, but to me, I thought these were really cool. I actually sunk a few of these into the siding in this building, so just for, you know, I don't know, authentic sake, I guess. Try and pull off a little more authenticness to the carpentry. So yeah, it took us about 2 years, 2.5 years maybe even, to actually take that pile of wood and put it on top of this concrete slab that was here when we bought the property. So obviously had some kind of pole building here at one time, and we went ahead and utilized it. Like I had said before, I had originally wanted to put it up there, but that was just too crazy, and the wood was starting to rot, and my heart was not really into this property. There were so many fights between my dad and I just didn't want to be here. I was deeply sad over the house, so. And now that he's thinking about getting rid of this property, I must admit, I do feel bad. Not as bad as I did for the house in town, however, but, you know, I still will miss it. We've definitely left our influence on this place. This is a little garage space that my dad and me, this was, you know, the barter in the deal. I wanted this space to be kind of like a kitchenette area, but my dad said he needed a tractor barn, and that was half the reason he built this structure, so I had to compromise, and that's fine. Part 2 to this video I figured I'd take to walking some of the trails. Try not to make too long of a video about this, but that's the scaffolding that helped us build the chimney. And it's actually my grandpa's. It's kind of a funny story, a real short one, but him and my dad and my dad's brother were helping on a job, and they got stiffed for payment, so that was the scaffolding, and that stuff was old then. I guess it looked just as rusty and old as it does now. So Grandpa showed up with his truck and told the kids to load it up, and my dad's been trucking that stuff around for the better part of, well, for most of his life. It's the same scaffolding that helped us paint the Victorian house in town. It's had a lot of history. It's been on a lot of jobs. So originally, if you wanted to get across the creek, because of how overgrown it was, long before we put the bridges in that we're not supposed to talk about, this was the trail you had to take. It was a narrow path between all the sticker bushes. You couldn't walk to the left of me, you couldn't walk to the right. I'm walking down the original line that we used to have to take to get to the other side. It's pretty much swimming through briars and stickers and everything. You couldn't see this nice little cove here that we've cut out. And a lot of this we just recently cleared for a second time this year. Found a really interesting piece of infrastructure. It's obvious that there was an awful lot of other things happening on this property. That cobble wall. We just recently found that. This is the furthest we've taken this area back. Kind of neat. Don't know what the point was. A lot of gravel above it. Who knows what they had built here originally, but that's obviously built by people. The land, the way that it's shaped around the creek in this area, always said to me that they had roads running along this creek. And it's obvious there used to be some kind of land bridge there, because we've pulled out metal culverts, which we've recently scrapped, but so I don't have any footage of it. But there used to be metal culverts scattered all the way down the creek on the other side. My thought is that they had a bad flood through here, culverts backed up, and then it just whoosh, built up pressure. I guess you could call this our original bridge. This has been here since the first time we crossed this. That plank has been here for almost 5 years. As I said before, the bridges we put in. So this is a building that we've never really done anything with other than clean. There used to be a ton of garbage in it. once again, we had to cut massive amounts of weeds back to get to the thing. I've done some metal work in here, played around with my furnace, melting stuff down, melting canned aluminum. Nasty stuff, so I don't do it very often. But never came to be, you know, it's always been kind of run down. There was drug needles and all kinds of stuff I found throughout this place, dishes and things. People were definitely living here, doing drugs, and it had to be a pretty nasty living because there's, you know, this place has been wide open for a while. Back then you couldn't even, when we first came here, couldn't, once again, get into this. It was just a pile of garbage and stickers. Literal garbage, clothing, disintegrating, just all kinds of nasty stuff. Supposedly this property was known as the hippie property, and, well, yeah. To get up here was a massive task. Again, weeds, narrow trails. Accidentally found this. This used to be a bed of sticker bushes up to your eyeballs. It was amazing finding that little road there. And what we're walking right now is the very first road that I cut through all this stuff. By the time you get up here, there were logs buried in grass. You couldn't see anything. I believe I mentioned my little cabin building site here. Couldn't see the upper field right here. Totally covered in overgrowth. And my original goal to going up here with my machete was to get my go-kart to come up here. And I did eventually complete that goal many times. Of course, it was so rough on the suspension that I would break welds and bust up stuff coming up here. This was all full of Scotch bloom or whatever, sagebrush, Scotch brush, the stuff you supposedly can never get rid of. There's even some trace amounts of it still around here, but we didn't do any poisoning, we didn't do any burning, we just kept on running it over with ATVs. So the trick is you cut it down and then you get vehicles and you just beat the crap out of the ground with the vehicles. Just run it over many times and it won't come back. Do you like driving ATVs? Do you like getting out and doing all-terrain stuff? That's all you gotta do to keep the stuff at bay. Just run over the area. That's literally what I did. There you go. This was some of it. Looks like it's been there for years. It hasn't. It's only been one season that it's all been dead. Ah, there we go. You farmer types probably recognize this dirty little devil. It grows on the fence still, but like I said, that whole thing was a big patch of it, and all I had to do was run it over with an ATV many times. So I'm going to head over to our other property line. We're still on the original road. Actually, originally I turned and headed back in towards the center of property because this area right here was so locked up in stickery vines and deadfall, things that they had left behind after logging this property, that walking it you would trip. Once again, no rolling vehicles of any kind would get back here unless they had tires twice the size of a normal tire, like a monster truck. And you can see burn piles that were getting ready to, you know, ignite. Everything through this area has been heavily weeded out recently, so it's a far cry of what it used to be in terms of how rugged it all was. But still on my original road here. My dad and I just recently, like within 2 weeks, cleared this all out. This all looked like that, only maybe about 20 or 30% higher. You can still kind of see how rough the land was because we haven't really touched this area much. So this is what it looked like coming back here. I mean, seriously, try to get a small go-kart through all this crap. Even my blaster, it stands no chance. You're gonna get stuck. All these types of crappy stickery vines are on everything. You know, you want to weed eat those to get the logs up, the deadfall, which is everywhere. If you don't get that out of the way, then you can't move the deadfall because it holds it. And if you try to move the deadfall before cutting it, like I said, it holds it. If you try to cut those vines first with the weed whacker, the deadfall stops it, the limbs. It's a constant battle back and forward. I remember swimming through all this stuff trying to figure out what way to go. And I believe the very first thing I did, I didn't know where the property line was. This was really bad, so I actually made the go-kart. I cut a trail up on top of this. I battled this little mound for 10 minutes. Actually almost got stuck by that tree there. Had one of my tires dip behind it and I had to lift it over. I should have been filming that whole thing, but I was really not in a great mood, and the only thing I could do to get my mind off of everything was come out here and beat the ground. So this is our original road down through. I'll probably periodically revisit it here, but while I'm in the area and while I have enough battery life too, I'd like to also kind of film the property line trail. So none of this was clear until just recently. And my dad just drove over it with a skid steer a few days ago. Our neighbor owns one. He let us borrow it. Here's my original trail down. Went through the center of property. It's kind of confusing now, but it used to actually steer to the right and then down this way. It looks a little different to me because I'm used to a big pile of snow pea, snowberry brush. Yep, here we are. And this is an intersection we ended up making about a year and a half, 2 years ago. It's actually on an original road that they used to probably haul the logs out of this property before we bought it. My road would go this way and down that lane. It's all covered in grass right now because I haven't been enjoying it lately. But being that I'm 40 miles away from here now, and I only come up here for work stays, work vacations, whatever you want to call it, work campaigns. Some of you have seen me on the other video battling the yard down there. That's where that ridiculous crap I was doing with the lawnmower. That area also used to be just as horrendous. It seems that that's most of this property was overgrown and horrendous. That's why I'm getting it on film right now, because the difference is going to be a shocker. And I really should have made more of a log before we got started with all this stuff, but my brain's been other places. It's my original road. You can see the treading. Just about out of camera life here, so I'm probably going to go ahead and pack it up. Here's my shooting range. I usually stand on the other side over by the ranger there and fire on this way. There is a trail here that meets an island down there. It's never been an ATV trail. It's too treacherous and steep. This goes back to our falling apart, dilapidated building. This is a trail that we hacked a couple of years ago. It's starting to become overgrown again. Doesn't take long. Probably another reason why I never really cared to film it. I always figured it would just come back in a year or two. Welcome to our island. It's hard to tell that it's an island, but the creek goes that way too. It splits right up right there. I suppose if I had been in better spirits, I might have considered this place a spot for a fort or something, but it is not the case. Yep, here's our weird little swamp island. And before all that yard work we did down here, once again, could not walk it, could not see anything. Done a lot of work around here. That's about all the time I have today. I know it's not really an interesting video, but I just kind of wanted to take note of our property because I don't know how much longer I'll have to be on it. So, thanks for watching, guys.
Keep on shining on me. Yeah, keep on shining your light. make everything alright.